Let me introduce Simran to our BC Tech audience. Hi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Jill. I'm really excited.
It's wonderful to have you. And I tried to introduce you, but did not do any credit to your amazing background. So why don't you introduce yourself and your story? Just tell us a little bit about your background and career.
I don't know if I can do a better job than you did, but I'll try. I'm an accountant by training, and I spent 10 years of my career at PwC. And I found myself working in the family office space, working with intergenerational families, advising them on everything from the emotional aspect of managing money and wealth to, investment strategies, analyzing deals. And so I spent years there, and I was very lucky to meet my co-founder, Alice Chen. She has an incredible background of her own, and was a misfit at PwC, and joined later in her life as a lawyer. And we came together and we kind of saw this niche in the market for multifamily office. And we first started a multifamily office where we were just working as consultants, and we saw a gap in the market in terms of, we needed technology and the technology was missing. And then next thing you know, here we are as fintech entrepreneurs.
Okay, well, that's an amazing origin story. Tell us a little bit more for those on the call who aren't familiar with MyFo and what you do and what the company is. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to launch it and what it does.
The key inspiration behind it was, there's this knowledge that, a very, very small percent of the population has in terms of how they manage their wealth and their families. And what we wanted to do was scale it. So our original thesis with actually our multifamily office was to democratize that knowledge. And we very quickly realized we had a scaling problem and we needed technology in order to scale it. How does an individual learn what estate structures should you use without spending a lot of money hiring an expert to help you with that? How do you understand an investment thesis if you haven't had that education? And how do you curate those investments for yourself? And those were the things that we wanted to bring together, and gain efficiencies in how all of that is managed with your documents, your people, and creating it easier to create intergenerational communication. And that's essentially the thesis of MyFo and what we solve. So what it does is it allows you to look at your assets, you scenario plan it based on benchmarks to comparative people in your wealth category. If you have hundreds of thousands of dollars, what does that look like? If you've got a couple million, you're running a business, what kind of leverage should you use? What should your asset allocation look like? And then you can store your documents there, and it guides you through your life stages. So if you're getting married, you're thinking about prenups, how to effectively do that without damaging your relationship. There are people that use those tools very effectively. What kind of a structure should you use? Do you need a holding company? Do you need a trust? And what do those things mean? And then all your documents, they're there. You don't have to call your lawyer and your accountant every time you need something, just making the whole KYC process easy every time you want to onboard a new investment. So that's essentially the thesis of MyFo.
Okay, so you're taking the structures and the setups and the tools and the approaches that the billionaires, the very wealthiest in the world, can invest in the infrastructure, and you're democratizing it through software to make it available to people who are less wealthy than that, but still have lots of assets and family issues to manage.
Exactly.
Okay, now you've told me that people describe you as an accidental fintech entrepreneur. So tell me, where does that name come from and what does it mean?
Well, I think I think Alice and I did whatever we could to resist becoming fintech entrepreneurs, because I think we knew how challenging it is to be on this path and build a tech company. We really just wanted to create a multifamily office that was more accessible. And we found that the only way to do that was to incorporate technology. And then we looked for it. We were like, there's no way somebody hasn't built this. It's a no-brainer. It's needed. And so that's why it's accidental, because we really weren't, you and I mutually know Cam, and he was one of the first people that said, you need to build it. And I was like, no way. So I was very resistant.
Yeah, it's quite a thing to move from the environment of PwC to the environment of being a startup entrepreneur. A very big leap, but we applaud you for doing it. And now that you're thinking about scaling your company, what are you hoping for the future? So what are your ambitions? What are your aspirations? What's the end game for this company?
It's exactly what we set out to do, right? And by definition, becoming a unicorn, the wealth platform that is used predominantly in North America, and it's providing people with these solutions that we've seen pain points for over and over again. And so that's really what we're hoping happens with MyFo.
So if I can unpack that a little, it sounds like you, as a new entrant into the space, your goal is to be number one in the world and in North America in this newly emergent space from
Absolutely. It's
BC.
quite an ambitious goal.
That's nice. I like it. I like it. This is one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on, was to hear about the sort of audaciousness of the ambition, and that these things can absolutely be done with the talent and the expertise and what we have here in our BC ecosystem. So it's exciting to hear that, but also it's a big goal. So um, is there anything that you learned along the way, or when you started to engage, that was your big goal, that was what you had in mind, that was what you wanted to do? Was there any first step or some of the things that you did at the beginning that were really critical to helping you deliver on that ambition that you would share with others?
I mean, that's the ambition now. When we started, the ambition was just to create a technology that our clients could use. So it was really going to be something that we were going to use as an organization. And so since then, we've heard more and more of how broad and wide the pain point is and the need. And so that ambition has grown. What we've done to get there is surround ourselves by people in this world, like people from finance, people in tech that are global leaders, to say, this is what we're building. Does our thesis make sense? Is there a need? And who do we need to bring onto our team to actually make it successful? And I think those crucial steps we took in the beginning, we were very, very lucky, and there's so much access to talent and knowledge in Vancouver and BC. And we were so fortunate in terms of like where we were and who we knew at the time to tap into those resources.
So that's two really key themes that we hear a lot from people who build successful scale ups. One is to be open to the pivot. You start doing one thing, and then as you learn more about the problem that you're deeply engaged in solving, you see a slightly different application, to be flexible to move in that direction. And the other one, of course, is to reach out to your network and seek advice and seek guidance, and ask for as many different pieces of feedback as you possibly can, because it's not about working on your own to develop something in isolation. It's really about capturing as much advice and input as you can gain. So it's really interesting to hear that those two things were just critical to you at the beginning of your story. Is there anything, as a woman founder, is there anything, any additional insight? Was there anything that you and Alice together brought that you think is somehow different or unique or worthy of note?
It is hard to tell, because you don't know exactly the journey your counterparts took to get to where they are. I think Alice and I were very cautious of the typical biases that women have in terms of and she's a very bold, bullish individual. And so I piggybacked off that, and we, networked in the US as quickly as we could. We were bold in asking people to join our board and join our team. And so those were things that we were cautious of. I think now what we're cautious of is we don't want the story to become about us and female founders. We want female founders to become the norm. And so it's not an exciting story, but what is an exciting story is the product and the solution we're solving for. And so, that's what I think our challenge is now. We don't want the fact that, it's rare to see two female co-founders to hijack the story of this incredible product we are building.
I think that's a great observation. You're a woman and you're a very interesting woman, but it's the least interesting thing about you. So,
I agree.
but let's unpack that a little bit, because you did talk about something there that I do think some women founders do struggle with, which is you were quite bold in your asks, right? So you sort of felt the fear and did it anyway, and just approached people that you thought could advance things. Can you tell us a little bit about one or two of the people that you approached, or how you approached them, and what caused you to just ask?
I think it's a part of sheer desperation and the acknowledging that you only know so much. I mean, our board members were probably an example of the people that we asked. I remember, Bill Dalton, luckily, spent a lot of his career in Vancouver and happened to be at an event I was at, and I started chatting with him. I didn't even actually understand the caliber of who he was, like the former chief executive of HSBC. But as I was talking to him about what I was doing, he gave me more advice in that 30 minutes than I think anyone had in my entire career. And I was like a sponge, and I right away said, look, I'm starting this startup. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I do understand the problem that I'm solving for. And would you be on my board and help me? And he asked me to give him his phone number, and he said, I'll text you. And I thought, I'm never going to hear from him again. And the next day we had a 2-hour coffee, and now he's one of my key advisors, and he's on our board. And Jeff Tyson, I didn't even have enough money to go down to a conference in Vegas that I knew all the fintech players were going to. And I actually found out from it with another friend that works for fintech. And I went through his app. I found out everyone that was going to be there. I figured out my 2 to 3 degrees of separation through LinkedIn, got invited to an off-campus roundtable, and he happened to be speaking there. And we sat next to each other. And, I said, you are a global leader in fintech. You build technology for some of the largest banks in the world. He's the global head of fintech for Bain and Company. Hey, do you want to help us? Like, let's have a call after this. And we asked him to be on our board. And he loved what we were solving. Luckily, we weren't, a payments company at these fintech conferences, because that's a lot of the focus. We were this new thesis and family office and wealth management that I think is very intriguing to people, and they understand the pain points, and some of them understand them personally. And so we got very fortunate with who we were making those asks to, and meeting with US VCs. We got a team out of the US that had connections, and we said, just start finding people for us, and we will pitch, and we'll start with a bold ask, and we'll slowly bring it down until we get to a place that makes sense. And that's exactly what we did.
That's great. And again, like unpacking that, I feel like we're writing our book, Simran, on the care and nurture of unicorns. That's what it's going to be called. But I love some of the things you're talking about there. So having a deep understanding and expertise of the pain point that you're solving. So maybe you don't have the how you're going to solve it yet, but you know exactly what you're doing. And then the getting yourself to the right venues and the right events, so that whether it's virtual or in person, you can be proximate to people who could give you valuable advice, and then just confidently asking, and having, of course, a great business idea, which is what causes people of this high caliber to be interested in leaning in. But you have to do the running on the first 3 things before you find out if you're going to be lucky on the last one, right? So I think there's a lot there that can really inspire and help others with what they might want to do. Let me ask you one final question, then I need to go to the floor and have a look at what people are asking, and ask you some of those questions. So again, please ask your questions if you're curious about Simran's journey. But I do want to ask you, is there anything that you learned along the way that you really wish you'd known at the beginning?
Every time somebody says that, I think of all the business quotes that were sent to me as I started off as an entrepreneur and how irked I would get every time someone who had made it was trying to give me advice because they didn't understand how incredibly hard it is when you start. I think besides my spouse, I don't think anyone knows how often I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What I would say is test your thesis. Don't spend all your money in an idea you have. Like try to make small steps. I think a few things that we did that were really helpful for us was we got enough money to do a prototype so we could test it with the market and understand if there was a need for it and visualize the solution that we were trying to solve for. So it wasn't fully coded, but it gave people a visual representation of what we wanted to build. And that was very, very helpful. And we surrounded ourselves with people, that were in this space that had expertise. Like we met with teams out of BC that have built successful tech like FinAI. We reached out and we said, here, this is what we're doing. What are some of the pain points you've experienced and how can we learn from them? Or our board members who, spent years working with family offices, are these pain, and just like getting confident in your thesis and your solution. I think those are that, and take small steps, I think are the two things that I think were really key in our success to this date.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And so just going to the chat, Raf's asking a question. Was there anything specific that you and Alice faced that were challenges as female founders?
I think overarching is kind of this idea that, it's so nuanced to see female founders, co-founders. And so one of the things was I think there's underlying expectation that our technology would be designed for women, which is fairly outrageous because we
Glad
can
you said it. Yeah.
we can build stuff for I wasn't a consultant for just women. Alice and I were advising men and women, and so we are experts in what we do. And so I think that was something that we had a bit of a hurdle of overcoming, and generally just like avoiding that hijacking our product and the conversation, the fact that we are women.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is, there are definitely a great deal of unexpressed expectations about women and women entrepreneurs and what they'll be working on. And it's a shame, but it's good to myth bust them. Let me look at the other expectations or questions in the chat. So Julia's asking, how important do you think startups are to the tech ecosystem?
We are the ones that are trying to take all the talent from everybody else. So I think we're important in the sense that we keep the competitive tension when it comes to talent. Like we had a lot of trouble attracting really, really good talent. So we had to make our product and or our idea very attractive to bring on that talent. So I think that tension is really good. And then the growth, like that, the potential for that growth and it to become, part of the economy of the province, I think is very, very important. Because eventually whatever tech we have now is going to get disrupted. And so we need this funnel of new technology coming through to keep that ecosystem fed, essentially.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love the way you're presenting that. I mean, as you know, with the launch of Easyjet for Startups, we're really focused on helping many more startups to grow and thrive. So hopefully we can partner with you and do more in that space. But I really love the way you reframe the talent challenges that startups can face, right? Makes me wonder whether anchor companies could learn something from startups about how they position the value proposition for talent, right? Because when you're a startup, you've got to make sure that the company and the project is really exciting because you don't have the marquee brand name to explain why someone might want to work for you. So it would be lovely to unpack the lessons of success that startups can offer others, as well as the other way around. So excellent. Okay, so let's see if we've got any other questions in the chat. This is an interesting one. Erica's saying, where do you gain inspiration? Do you have any favorite books or podcasts? Is there anything in particular that you listen to or you enjoy engaging with to to keep your ideas fresh?
I think I'm like a nerd when it comes to finance and fintech. So I do like I love The Economist, Financial Times, and so I think I try like and subscribe to Morningstar and their newsletters. So I try really hard to understand the world of finance because that's where I spend most of my time. I generally also just really love listening to people and their stories. And so I think I was really fortunate in my career to be surrounded, like a firm like PwC, there's just so many smart people and incredibly smart clients that I've always been able to learn from. So I do love the conversations and yeah, so nothing that interesting that I think I do.
So tell me what, maybe I could ask you a question of my own. What is a typical day in the life look like? Where do you spend, or a typical week look like for you? Where do you spend your time? What are you doing at this phase of the company growth journey?
I think there's like cycles that happen with tech companies. So we were kind of hard in this cycle of raising fundraising. So we were pitching day in, day out. Right now, we are in product launch mode. We've got a beta coming out in September, and we're launching the product in November. And so we are just reiterating every day. So it's looking at new mock-ups, giving feedback, ensuring and building our marketing plan and our go-to-market. So getting people excited about it, talking about it. So it's just basically like, I work from home, so it's like you wake up, you sit at your desk, and these are the problems I'm solving all day, every day, and at the same time trying to keep our investors happy, making sure we're getting information to them timely.
Yeah, so it's juggling quite a few things, but you're working fully remote. Does the team ever get together? Do you find that's necessary, or are you?
We do. We try to do that kind of like once a month, just to have some face-to-face time. Whether it's my co-founder actually spends a lot of time in Silicon Valley, so whenever we're together, we try to spend a lot of time together because just through conversation, you're able to kind of figure out where do we want to go, what are some of the pain points that we're maybe not talking about because we have such structured calls. So we try to do that as often as possible. But it's interesting living in this new digital world.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? There's some upsides and some downsides for sure. But it does make you a bit more intentional. I think you really need to think about how you're going to engage, which is a good thing. I'm just seeing in the chat that Ashley's raising a question. How have you learned to gauge when good enough is good enough? So how to determine when to stop at a certain phase of the company and move things forward, but not too soon.
I don't know if we've perfected that art. From my background, I was an auditor, so it's like everything you try to get it as perfect as possible. And I think it's really like for us, it's listening to our team, right? So it's figuring out, the balance between, how important is it for us to do this and what is it going to cost us to do it? So doing that analysis, that cost benefit analysis, I think is very key because both Alice and I, based on our backgrounds, are very, very detail oriented. Our product is a very UX UI driven product, and we care deeply about our end user. So there are decisions we have to make in terms of, we've only raised a little bit of money. So what is it that we're actually going to build? Because we have these lofty goals of what the product's going to look like. And I think the hard lesson we've had is at some point you have to produce something because otherwise you're stagnant. And we experienced that because we had a prototype and we wanted to raise enough money to build the best product ever. And you go there and what investors want to see is slow progress. And so that's what we had to kind of go back and do is raise a little bit of money so we can have an MVP. And then from that MVP, we can reiterate.
That's great. That's really very, very helpful insights, I would say. Yeah, I'm a recovering perfectionist myself. So I find that deadlines And having a go live date actually provides a really useful discipline, forces you to prioritize and decide what matters, what doesn't matter quite so much, and just go.
Yeah.
But it often feels uncomfortable, right? So,
Oh,
um,
absolutely. It's like this. What I love about tech is this culture of fast fail or fail fast. And so it's like you quickly make the decision and then you quickly decide whether or not you're on the right path and you go from there. And we were lucky with, one of our board members, he runs one of the largest engineering teams for tech talent in the country. And he said, you know, just when we were trying to hire our team, he's like, you're going to have to start somewhere. You could interview this person until you're basically blue in the face. But what you need to do is start, and then you'll know if they're the right hire. And if they aren't, um, and you'll reiterate from there, and you'll find somebody else. And lucky for us, we followed our gut and built and hired a team that we really love.
that's awesome. No, that's very good to hear. So we've got another question in the chat. Mora is asking, how do you balance getting support and sharing your great idea and much needed software with people in your industry without running the risk of somebody stealing it? Oh, great question, Mora.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think when we started with the idea, um, a key part of it, I think, was like we knew how hard it is to build this, and there was subject matter expertise in the family office space that only a few people have. And most of those people that have that knowledge aren't incentivized to actually build or a tech platform because they're already making really good money. And stealing an idea is one piece. It's the execution. Like you think about like Twitter, it's 160 characters that get posted. And if you think about it, it's not an earth-shattering strategy. Like you think when somebody probably would have told somebody like me, like this is my idea, I would have been like, that's a stupid idea. But it's all in the execution, right? So there's this long path of execution when you have an idea that in the beginning it seems like someone can steal it and run with it, but there's so much work that goes into that that it's actually quite difficult for someone to steal your idea and run with it. And sometimes you have first mover advantage. Sometimes you're building on somebody else's technology saying like, oh, I really like this software, but I would fix it X, Y, and Z. And so you build a new version of it.
Yeah, it's a great. I think it's a great point. I think we worry about that too much, and I think we
I
also
agree. Yeah.
we fetishize the idea instead of the execution of results against the idea. And the more you can build a really sustainable, scalable company where execution is in the details, then actually it's quite difficult to steal that value. But it's a great conversation to have all the time and to be challenging yourself on it. Great. Let me just do one final call just to see if anyone else has any other questions. And if not, I have one final question for you before I go to wrapping up. So no, last call. But my last question to you is an easy one, and take as long as you want to answer it because I know that people would want to hear. Do you have any final words of wisdom? Do you have any parting words of advice? What can you share to inspire and encourage others?
I don't know if I am qualified to provide wisdom. Like we're such a new startup, our product is just launching. So there's a lot of TBDs right now. But I think what's been exciting about this path is the people we've been able to meet and the people that have given us the time and the attention to support us through it. So if you are going to go down this path and you have a great idea that you want to run with, just tell people about it, ask for help. I think that's been the best part is asking for help and people showing up for you and people walking you through things and giving you the time. It's a tremendous learning opportunity.
Well, that is a lovely message and a great segue back to me because BC Tech, of course, wants to be the place where people can come to access the network and connect with others that can help them. So thank you, Simran, for sharing your insights. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. It was a great conversation, and thank you to our audience for your active participation.